She was divorced while pregnant, abandoned and humiliated. Her husband walked away, believing she had nothing. What he never knew was that her father, who died in silence, was a secret billionaire, and left everything to her. This is what happens when patience replaces revenge. And the woman everyone underestimated finally rises. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe to this channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. Amara remained silent. To the town, she was still the abandoned woman. Pregnant, grieving, forgotten. She dressed simply, walked slowly, and spoke little. She attended church quietly and returned to her small room without complaint. People passed her on the road without greeting her. Some whispered. Others pitied her. A few looked away, ashamed of how quickly they had erased her from their lives. And Amara let them believe the story they had written for her. But behind the veil of humility, an entirely different world moved at her command. In private offices far from the dusty streets of her town, powerful men and women adjusted their seats when her name was mentioned. Lawyers flew in without hesitation. Bankers spoke in careful tones. Executives waited for her approval before making billion-dollar decisions. When she signed documents, markets shifted. When she spoke softly into a phone, doors opened across continents. She did not raise her voice. She did not announce herself. She did not rush. Because her father had taught her one final lesson. True power does not make noise. Amara spent her days learning. Studying the empire she had inherited. Reading reports late into the night, one hand resting protectively on her growing belly. She learned how her father had protected everything. How trusts were layered, how ownership was hidden, how loyalty was rewarded and betrayal quietly neutralized. Every asset was intact, every account secure, every move anticipated. Nothing could be stolen, nothing could be challenged. She was not just wealthy, she was untouchable, and yet she chose patience. She remembered Daniel's cold eyes as he handed her the divorce papers. The way Vanessa had smiled as if she had won something priceless. The silence of friends who vanished. The laughter that followed her humiliation. She remembered it all. But she did not act. Because revenge rushed, is weak. Amara understood now that timing was everything. Power revealed too early invites chaos. Truth exposed too quickly gives enemies time to hide. So she waited. She watched Daniel enjoy his false victory. She watched Vanessa parade borrowed confidence. She watched the town rewrite history, pretending they had never wronged her. And in that waiting, something changed inside her. The pain hardened into clarity. The tears dried into resolve. The broken woman disappeared. In her place stood someone new. Not bitter, not cruel, but awake. One night, as rain tapped gently against the window, Amara placed both hands on her stomach and whispered to the life growing inside her. You will never beg. You will never be discarded. And no one will ever measure your worth by what you can give them. The child stirred as if answering her. Amara smiled, not with joy but with certainty. The board was set. The players were in position. And the queen had chosen to stay hidden. For now. Because when she finally stepped into the light, nothing and no one would remain the same. Daniel married Vanessa in a ceremony so grand it felt louder than love. The event took place in the most expensive hall the city could offer. Crystal chandeliers, flowing white fabric, imported flowers that filled the air with sweetness. Music echoed from speakers so powerful they shook the walls. Guests arrived in designer outfits, phones raised high, recording every moment. Daniel stood at the center of it all, chest lifted, chin high. He felt victorious. To him, this wedding was not just a union, it was proof. Proof that he had chosen correctly. Proof that leaving Amara had been the right decision. Proof that he had escaped what he believed was a future of nothing. As Vanessa walked down the aisle, she smiled widely, soaking in the attention. Her dress glittered under the lights, her makeup flawless, her confidence overflowing. She had won. At least that was what she believed. Vanessa leaned close to Daniel during the reception. Her voice low but sharp with ambition. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. "We need to live like people expect us to live." Daniel nodded eagerly. He wanted that life. The respect, the envy, the admiration. He wanted to be seen as a man who had arrived. And so Vanessa pushed. She encouraged him to invest in businesses he barely understood. To join elite circles where appearance mattered more than substance. To spend money quickly. To dress well, host lavish dinners, and never appear uncertain. "You can't look small," she often said. "People respect what looks expensive." Daniel listened. He began stretching himself thin, pouring money into ventures with impressive names but fragile foundations. He borrowed. He promised. He smiled through doubt. Each time he hesitated, Vanessa reminded him, "You left poverty behind. Don't look back." And Daniel believed her. He began to move in circles where people spoke of influence and power, of hidden investors and quiet giants who controlled industries from the shadows. He longed to belong there, unaware that some worlds were not entered by noise, but by lineage. At home, Vanessa spent freely, redesigning the house, changing furniture, hosting gatherings filled with laughter that sounded just a little forced. She spoke endlessly of the future, of travel, status, recognition. And Daniel, desperate to maintain the image of success, played along. What he did not see was the thin line beneath his feet. What he did not know was that some of the companies he sought to impress were already familiar with a different name. A name spoken with respect. A name signed in silence. A name that carried real power. Amara Okoye. Far away, in a quiet room, Amara read a report delivered by one of her advisors. Her expression did not change as she scanned the page. Daniel Okoye. New ventures. Aggressive expansion. High exposure. She closed the folder slowly. No anger. No satisfaction. Only understanding. She whispered softly, almost to herself. "He is climbing a ladder that doesn't belong to him." And then she did nothing. Because the most dangerous storms are the ones that wait until the sky is clear. Daniel thought he was stepping into a world of power. He had no idea. He was already standing inside it. And the ground beneath him was about to shift. Amara made her first move without raising her voice. No announcements. No confrontations. No warning. Just quiet shifts. Small on the surface, devastating underneath. In boardrooms across cities Daniel had never visited, signatures were withdrawn. Contracts that once seemed solid dissolved with a single email. Projects he had proudly spoken about suddenly stalled, then stopped completely. One morning Daniel woke to 3 missed calls. By noon it was 7. By evening his phone would not stop vibrating. A logistics partner blamed unexpected restructuring. A supplier apologized politely, then disappeared. An investor who had once praised Daniel's vision suddenly claimed the market was unstable. The words were different. The outcome was the same. Everything began to collapse. Daniel sat in his office, staring at his laptop, refreshing his inbox again and again as if the bad news might reverse itself. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. These deals were secure. By the end of the week the bank called. Then another. Then another. Loans were being recalled. Politely, firmly, without negotiation. Daniel's hands shook as he read the messages. This wasn't failure. This was removal. At home, Vanessa noticed the change before he said a word. The dinners became quieter. The laughter disappeared. The credit alerts arrived. One evening, she stood in the doorway watching him pace the living room. His tie loosened, his face tight with stress. "What's going on?" she asked sharply. Daniel hesitated. "Just delays," he said. "Temporary issues." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You said these people trusted you." "They do," he snapped. "They did." That night she laughed. Not with humor but with disbelief. "So this is the powerful man I married," she sneered. "Or was that just talk?" Daniel froze. Her words hit harder than the bank calls. He tried to explain. Tried to sound confident. tried to hold the image together. But Vanessa had changed. She had loved the promise of success. She respected the appearance of power. But she had no patience for uncertainty. "You told me you had connections," she said coldly. "You told me you were entering elite circles." "I am," Daniel insisted. "I just need time." Vanessa shook her head. "Time is expensive. And you're starting to look small." That night Daniel slept poorly. Dreams filled with closing doors, unanswered calls, faces turning away. And somewhere far from his crumbling world, Amara sat calmly with her advisors. She listened as reports were delivered. Not with excitement, not with satisfaction, with control. "Phase 1 is complete," one voice said. Amara nodded slowly. She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the steady reminder of life, of patience, of purpose. "This is not punishment," she said quietly. "It is balance." Outside, the world kept moving. Inside Daniel's life, the cracks widened. Because when power moves in silence, by the time you hear it, it is already too late. The ballroom shimmered with light. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars above hundreds of powerful figures. Executives, investors, politicians, industry leaders, all gathered for one of the most exclusive business events of the year. Daniel stood near the center of it all, adjusting his jacket, forcing confidence into his posture. This was where he belonged. Or so he told himself. Vanessa clung to his arm, dressed to be noticed, scanning the room with sharp, calculating eyes. Then the doors opened. The sound was subtle, but the shift in the room was not. Conversations paused. Heads turned. The air itself seemed to rearrange. Amara stepped inside. Not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. She wore a simple yet flawless gown, elegant, refined, powerful in its restraint. Her pregnancy showed gently, not as a weakness, but as a crown she carried with quiet pride. Her posture was calm, her face composed, her eyes steady. For a moment, Daniel didn't recognize her. Then his breath caught. His chest tightened. His vision narrowed. It was her. Amara. The woman he had chased into the rain. The woman he had called nothing. The woman he had abandoned when he believed she had no future. She walked forward, each step measured, unhurried. Executives moved toward her instantly. "Madam Okoye. It's an honor. We've been expecting you." Hands were shaken. Smiles were offered. Paths were cleared. People made space. Daniel's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered softly against the floor. No one noticed. His knees weakened as reality struck him with brutal clarity. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't luck. This was power. Vanessa's smile froze, then cracked, then disappeared entirely. Her fingers tightened around Daniel's arm. "Why are they calling her that?" she whispered sharply. "Who is she?" Daniel couldn't answer. He couldn't breathe. Amara passed them. She didn't slow. Didn't glance their way. Didn't acknowledge their existence. That silence screamed louder than any accusation. Vanessa watched as Amara was ushered toward the front, where reserved seating waited. As men who had once ignored Daniel leaned in respectfully toward her. As whispers followed her like shadows. "That can't be her," Vanessa muttered. "That's not possible." But deep down she already knew. Daniel's mind raced backward. Every contract lost, every call ignored, every door that had slammed shut without explanation. The truth assembled itself piece by piece. He had not been unlucky. He had been removed. Amara took her seat, crossed her hands gently over her stomach, and finally looked up. Her eyes met Daniel's for a single heartbeat. There was no anger in them, no pride, no cruelty, only clarity. And in that moment, Daniel understood something far more terrifying than revenge. She had won without saying a word. And this was only the beginning. The truth did not arrive gently. It exploded. Not with shouting, not with accusations, but with facts, cold, precise, undeniable. Daniel sat alone in his office long after the event had ended, his phone trembling in his hand as message after message poured in. Links. Documents. Chief Ezekiel Okoye. He typed it again. And again. What appeared on his screen shattered everything he thought he knew. Shell companies. Foundations. Global holdings. Silent partnerships spanning continents. Shipping. Energy. Agriculture. Technology. Real estate. The numbers made his stomach twist. This was not wealth. This was an empire. And at the center of every document, every trust, every controlling interest, one name stood untouched and absolute. Amara Okoye. Daniel's throat went dry. He scrolled faster, panic rising with every line. Legal articles. Financial journals. Private investment reports now made public after the transfer of ownership. Upon the passing of Chief Ezekiel Okoye, full authority and assets were transferred to his only child, Amara Okoye, under prearranged global protections. His hands began to shake. He stood up too quickly, knocking his chair backward, not caring as it crashed against the floor. She owns all of this, he whispered to no one. Memories slammed into him all at once. Amara offering her savings to support his business. Amara standing quietly while he complained about money. Amara begging him not to leave. Pregnant, vulnerable, loyal. And him. Calling her nothing. Calling her a burden. Calling her future empty. Daniel's chest burned. He had divorced a trillionaire's daughter, while she was carrying his child. The weight of that reality crushed his pride like glass beneath a boot. His phone rang. Vanessa. He didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Finally he picked up. What is happening? Vanessa demanded, her voice sharp with panic. People are saying things about Amara, about her father, about you. Daniel swallowed hard. It's true, he said quietly. Silence. Then a laugh. Nervous. Disbelieving. Don't be ridiculous, Vanessa said. That woman lived in a rented room. She was hiding, Daniel replied, his voice breaking. And I helped destroy myself. Vanessa's breath hitched. No, she whispered. No, you're lying. But the truth was already closing in. Vanessa hung up. Minutes later, Daniel received another notification. A message from a law firm. Object. Board review. Effective immediately. Then another. Asset reallocation notice. Then another. Termination of strategic partnership. The walls of his office suddenly felt too close. This was not punishment. This was consequence. Daniel sank into his chair, staring at the ceiling as his world collapsed in silence. For the first time in his life, there was no one to blame. Not fate. Not luck. Not betrayal. Only himself. The room felt heavy. Quiet. Me. Just like the future he had chosen. And somewhere across the city, Amara slept peacefully, untouched by the storm she had already survived. Because the truth had finally arrived. And it had destroyed pride, without mercy. Daniel had never imagined his life would bend this low. The same man who once walked away with pride now stood trembling in a silent boardroom, surrounded by polished glass walls and people who would no longer meet his eyes. At the center of the room stood Amara. Composed. Unshaken. She wore no crown, yet power rested naturally on her shoulders. Daniel's legs gave way. He fell to his knees. Not dramatically. Not for show. But because his body could no longer carry the weight of regret. I didn't know, he sobbed, pressing his palms against the cold floor. I swear. I didn't know who you were. His voice cracked. I was blind. I was foolish. Please, forgive me. The room remained quiet. No gasp. No whispers. Just the sound of a man finally hearing the truth echo back at him. Amara looked down at him, her face soft, but not weak. There was no anger in her eyes. That hurt him more than rage ever could. You didn't leave because you didn't know, she said gently. You left because you believed I had nothing. Daniel lifted his head, tears streaking his face. I loved you, he whispered desperately. I made a mistake. Amara shook her head slowly. No, she replied. You made a choice. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Our child felt your absence before they ever felt your arms, she continued quietly. I begged you to stay, asked you to see me. You looked away. Daniel's shoulders shook. I'll do anything, he pleaded. I'll fix it. I'll change. Amara's voice remained steady. Change does not erase truth, she said. And love cannot survive where dignity was destroyed. She took a small step back, not in fear but in finality. You didn't love me when you thought I had nothing, she said. And I will not return now that you know I have everything. Those words landed heavier than any verdict. Daniel collapsed forward, his forehead touching the floor. The meeting ended without applause, without triumph. Justice didn't need noise. That same week, Vanessa disappeared from his life. Her calls went unanswered. Her social appearances stopped. Her ambition found no footing in a world she never understood. When wealth stopped answering her name, she moved on, just as she always had. Daniel was left alone. No wife, no fortune, no future to bargain with. And as Amara walked out of the building, sunlight touching her face, she did not feel victory. She felt release. Because some doors are not meant to be reopened. And some love, once broken, must remain in the past. The child arrived at dawn. Not with chaos, not with fear, but with quiet strength, like a promise fulfilled. Amara labored in a private hospital where the halls were silent, and the hands that touched her were gentle and respectful. Doctors moved with precision. Nurses spoke in low, calming voices. Everything around her reflected care, dignity, and safety. When the cry finally filled the room, Amara wept. Not from pain, but from relief. A healthy baby lay in her arms, small fingers curling instinctively around her own, a tiny heartbeat pressing life into her chest. In that moment, the weight of betrayal loosened its grip. This child was not born of loss. This child was born of survival. She whispered softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. You are loved. Always. Outside the room there were no cameras, no headlines, no announcements, only silence and protection. The world did not yet need to know who this child belonged to. Amara named the child carefully, choosing a name that carried meaning, resilience, and legacy. A name her father would have smiled at. A name that spoke of light after darkness. In the months that followed, Amara transformed grief into purpose. She established foundations in her father's name, quietly, thoughtfully, without celebration. Schools rose in forgotten towns. Hospitals opened where mothers once gave birth without hope. Scholarships found children whose dreams had been buried by poverty. Not because she wanted to prove anything, but because she remembered. She remembered the small rooms, the whispered judgments, the feeling of being abandoned while carrying life. And she chose to become the answer she once prayed for. Her power did not harden her. It softened her. At night, she held her child close, rocking gently, humming the same lullaby her father once sang to her. You will never beg for love, she whispered. You will never be abandoned. You will grow knowing who you are. The child slept peacefully, unaware of the empire waiting, unaware of the storm that had been survived. Born not into revenge, but into purpose. Born not into noise, but into power shaped by compassion. And as Amara looked down at her child, she understood something clearly. This was not the end of her story. This was the beginning of a legacy that would outlive pain, betrayal, and silence. A legacy built not on wealth, but on love that endured. Daniel faded quietly, not with drama, not with headlines, not with apologies that mattered. The man who once believed he held the future in his hands became a footnote in conversations that no longer mentioned his name. Business circles stopped returning his calls. Invitations disappeared. The confidence he once wore like armor crumbled under the weight of his own choices. He did not fall because Amara pushed him. He fell because the foundation of his life had been built on illusion. Vanessa left without explanation, taking with her the noise, the pressure, and the false pride that had once fueled him. The grand home echoed with emptiness. The mirrors reflected a man who no longer recognized himself. And slowly, painfully, Daniel understood the truth too late. He had mistaken love for advantage. He had traded loyalty for appearance. He had abandoned character for convenience. There was no courtroom victory for Amara. No public confrontation. No moment of revenge. Because her silence had already spoken louder than anger ever could. While Daniel shrank into obscurity, Amara rose. Steadily, intentionally. She did not announce her success. She did not seek validation. She did not rewrite history to make herself look flawless. Instead, she lived well. Her foundations grew across regions, touching lives she would never meet. Her decisions created opportunities, not dependency. Her leadership inspired respect, not fear. People spoke of her with quiet admiration. She listens. She remembers where she came from. She leads without crushing others. And at the center of it all was her child. Growing, laughing, protected by love rather than wealth. Amara taught her child lessons money could never buy. That kindness is strength. That patience is power. That silence, when chosen wisely, can shape destiny. Years later, when asked in an interview how she survived betrayal without bitterness, Amara paused before answering. "I learned something my father taught me," she said calmly. "People reveal who they are when they think you have nothing. And life has a way of correcting those lessons, without noise." She never spoke Daniel's name. She didn't need to. Because the world had already learned the final lesson. Never abandon someone in their weakest season. Never measure a person by what they can give you. Never underestimate quiet dignity. Because true power does not shout. True wealth does not rush. And true love does not leave when things become inconvenient. Amara Okoye did not rise through revenge. She rose through grace. And that was the lesson that outlived them all. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to this channel so you won't miss our next interesting story filled with love, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Until our next story.